instead of just having another Victor Wembanyama conversation, which is something we've done now like 4 times in the last month on this show, because this is what we do on this podcast. We talk about Victor Wembanyama, apparently, which why not? He's like the best prospect to come along in a long time. I want to pose this to you because I think it's a more interesting angle than what we've talked about. Richard Jefferson got a lot of shit for talking about on ESPN that he thinks Victor Wembanyama would go ahead of LeBron James if both of them as prospects were in this class. I don't think that's a crazy take. I disagree with it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an insane take.
Yeah.
I want to pose that question to you, though. A, do you think that Victor Wembanyama would go ahead of LeBron James, given what teams tend to value, given past history of the draft, given all of this? And second, do you think it's a crazy conversation to have?
Well, I'll answer number 2 first. It's definitely not a crazy conversation to have. It's just not. Victor Wembanyama, the tools that he has, his physical size and what he's able to do with that size from both a shot-making perspective, a ground coverage perspective on offense, and just his defensive, not just impact, but versatility. Yeah, It has to be a conversation. He's so good in so many different areas at 18. We have to be having this talk. Man, it's tough, though. I'd probably go with LeBron. And it's so hard because I didn't watch a lot of high school LeBron. Like, that's a little bit before my time. I was 12 when he was drafted. You know, YouTube wasn't really a thing. Like, hard for me to really know and be able to compare prospects to prospect and to not have the biased lens of how good LeBron James has actually panned out to be / how healthy he's been relatively throughout his career.
That's what makes this conversation, I think, very difficult, is trying to remove what we know about LeBron now versus what it was previously.
Yeah. And I don't have as much context for what it was coming into the draft, but I will say this. I've been watching college basketball and you know, prior levels to the NBA for a really long period of time. I've been doing scouting now this is my 6th year doing this. Victor Wembanyama is head and shoulders above anyone else that I've scouted and seen during this period of time, just as a pro prospect.
Yeah. So I've gone back and like really tried to get a sense of what LeBron was, because I kind of figured out I was going to ask you this and fuck with you a little bit on the show.
Thanks, Sam.
I don't think he would go ahead of LeBron. I think that there are enough injury concerns about Vic that I don't think a team would sell themselves on taking him ahead of LeBron James. LeBron James, some of the stuff he was doing in high school was just an absolute joke. Like, his ability to completely dominate the game, his ability to be a high-level passer, playmaker, like the combination of like Jordan and Magic Johnson was like thrown around like regularly with LeBron. And I think that it's easier to sell yourself on that combination than it is on whatever Vic is, given the fact that Vic is still just very skinny. I know that like Vic has very much not lifted weights. He's tried to avoid like putting his body in any position where a team, once they get their hands on him, like there's like irreparable damage or anything like that. Right. But he's been hurt. Like, he's nothing long-term, nothing serious, like nothing you can point to and be like, oh, that's a problem, like going forward into his future. But like, he misses a month here, he misses a month there. Like, it's not like he needs to stay healthy this year. I think that's what teams most want to see. Like, they want to see Vic be 100% healthy throughout the course of this year. I think LeBron would go ahead of Victor Wembanyama. I think Vic would go ahead of Anthony Davis. I think Vic would go ahead of a lot of the guys that have been taken since LeBron. I think basically everyone since LeBron. I think that's what we're talking about here. And it was surprising. Look, I guess it's not surprising to me that Richard Jefferson got a lot of shit for saying this, because it's the internet and everyone's going to throw a lot of shit at people for saying things that could be perceived as outlandish. But I do get where Richard Jefferson's coming from. Richard Jefferson's a little bit older than we are, comes from a era where the big man was valued more than it is now. Um, throughout the course of history, bigs have gone number one ahead of guards, right? Like Akeem Olajuwon over Michael Jordan. You just kind of look down the line. Like it's been a consistent part of the NBA draft that guys who are 7 foot tall tend to go ahead of guys that are 6'6", because it's harder to find guys that are 7 foot tall theoretically. But as we've moved into the modern era of basketball, where positional scarcity and finding two-way wings is the most valuable thing you can find on the court, it's different now than it was then. And I think that if this was 2005 or even like 2000 or something, I might be willing to hear the argument that a team would take Vic ahead of LeBron. I don't think it would be a thing now. Like I think LeBron would like undeniably go ahead of Victor Wembanyama. But back when teams didn't have as much information, back when scouting was a little bit harder, back when things were a little bit more difficult. But then again, like I guess that taking the Euro guy number one back in 2003 was probably like a non-starter on some level when someone like LeBron is sitting there. So maybe not. Maybe he wouldn't even go number one then. But yeah, like I think that it's not like the craziest conversation to me. So like I'm not surprised that Richard Jefferson got shit for it, but I think it was like a little bit undeserved that Richard Jefferson got shit for this.
Yeah. And it's also hard to look back at that era and know, would Victor Wembanyama have been enabled by his current team, his NBA team, to play in the style that he plays in as a 7'4" guy? Are they going to let him handle with the ball in his hands, push up tempo in transition, shoot as many threes as he does? That wasn't something that we saw 20 years ago. So there's so much about this that is, comparing apples to oranges just because the game has changed so much.
Well, like one of the things I've done as well is like gone back to try and watch Kareem, like at UCLA, trying to find like as many clips as I can, trying to find like as many little like things as I can. Ralph Sampson, Arvydas Sabonis, all of the great like young players throughout history. Over the course of the last like 3 weeks, I've tried to watch as much as I can in order to contextualize what Victor Wembanyama is and what he's not. I would be so fascinated to know what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would have looked like in the modern era. It's a joke. Like anything that's available online, and like there's not like a crazy amount of like UCLA clips that are available online of Kareem, but anything that's available, it's like, oh my God, this is not human. In the same way that we're talking about Vic being like not human. He just completely changed like the geometry and trajectory of the game. They banned dunking for a decade in college basketball because Kareem was so good. Like, think about that. That's how good this guy was, that they couldn't allow him to dunk anymore because otherwise it would be too hard to stop him and there would be no competitiveness within the sport.
Yeah, that's something. That's something.
Just think about that. That's crazy. That's how good Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, aka Lou Alcindor at the time, was. Yeah. He was so good they banned dunking.
Well, now I'm trying to think about what the equivalent would be for somebody in today's game, like for Victor Wembanyama. What would you ban? Like rebound and run ability? Would you just ban blocking?
Yeah,
shots?
you have to outlet the ball before you get to half court or something like that as a rebounder, or like if you're above 7 foot tall, you couldn't shoot threes, like something like that, right? Like it's ridiculous. That's how good Kareem was though, and it's like, trying to contextualize Vic, it's like within that like ballpark to me. But to get back to the original point, like I often wonder, like Kareem very clearly had great touch, right? Like I wonder if he would have been able to step back and shoot threes. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll never know.
Like I feel like he might have. Like Ralph Sampson, for instance, I think Ralph Sampson definitely could have.
Yeah.
Because like part of his game was taking like 18 footers, 20 footers, something like that. He'd maybe take like one a game, it felt like, from what I've seen. And I've seen more of Ralph Sampson than I have of Kareem, because I've been able to go back. Like there's just more out there of Ralph Sampson, just because more of his games, it seems, were like televised in a real substantial way, being, in the late 70s, early 80s, as opposed to Kareem, who was in the late 60s. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. That's how good Vic is, though. He's in that conversation with LeBron. He's more in the conversation with LeBron and like Anthony Davis than he is like the Andrew Wiggins, et cetera, guys that were the next LeBron previously.
Yep, no doubt about it.